everybody, welcome to number 27, I'm Jack. Today I'm going to be talking to you about a car which is in theory a challenger for the amazing Lotus Elise. So my friend James, who does sort of car photography and car video stuff, and he's helping me with some of the flybys today and the drone shots if they make it to this video, has been telling me that a Toyota MR2 Spyder, so the third generation MR2, is 90% of an Elise for a fifth of a price. And I have to say that I am somewhat skeptical, and the reason why I'm skeptical is that I am absolutely in love with Elises. Look, despite that though, Toyota guys, I'm going to give it a fair shot, okay? So, but I absolutely love Elises. I think my S1, this one, the Frankenlease, is just, for me, it's the best driving car. It's the best I've ever driven. It's not the quickest car by any means, but it's just the whole thing about it. It's just everything. It's the way it turns. There's just no inertia. It's so instant on the responses. The steering is basically telepathic. Even the gearbox, which is much sort of derided, most of the time it's an absolute pleasure. The shift is quite nice, short, has a nice little feel to it. It's just that sometimes it can be awkward to get in the right gear, so that is one of the failings. And obviously it is also extremely uncomfortable. It's loud, it's quite harsh, there's no creature comforts whatsoever. But most of all, the prices have really shot up recently, so to get a good S1 you need probably in the region of, I think 15,000 is probably a starter price, but more than that, I think, really, to get a nice one. This one is a car that I rescued. Some of you will have seen the story. It had accident damage to the chassis. So, but it's actually quite a good car. It's got the uprated engine, so it's 145 horsepower, the VVC engine, rather than the standard 118 horsepower engine that it came with. And it feels plenty nippy enough. Also, some people say that the Toyota engine cars are better. It's a better engine, there's more power, and I can see where they come from. Plus the K-Series engines have a reputation for being quite fragile. Oh, I love this car. But I think if properly looked after, they're okay, and the character of the K-Series I think suits the Elise really well. It's quite uncouth, it's quite racy. I think I prefer it to the Toyota version, and it has more torque as well. The Toyota version, you have to just rip it to the red line the whole time to make any progress. So I like the K-Series. I'm not going to spend much more time talking to you about the Elise because there's so many videos I've done on that already. So let's now go straight to the MR2, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that car, the history, and also let's see really finally how it compares to this. Right then, MR2. So this is a third gen. The first and second generations are actually much loved, but this one's never quite garnered the same amount of enthusiasm as the other two, and that's quite odd in a way because it is a car made relatively recently, which weighs, from a mass manufacturer, which still weighs 1,000 kilograms. So it's actually a really big achievement for a production car, and it's quite an interesting thing. So how does it feel compared to the Elise? Well, I think the only thing that I can definitely say which is similar between the two is that sort of little mid-engine position and the relatively lightweight does make for a car that does turn in with very little inertia. It really does. There's a big difference already with the steering. So on the MR2, the steering is power assisted and you can really feel it. It robs it of some of that natural feel. It's sharp off centre, but it feels a little bit vague, a little bit dead. It's odd and it's hard to describe, and it's nothing that you would pick up in any normal car. It's just because I've driven the Elise and now I'm driving this that the steering doesn't feel quite right. It's not bad by any means, but yes, in that way certainly it doesn't compare to the Elise. The thing is though, the interior, wow, I mean, it's so much nicer to be in than the Elise, and like the switches don't feel like they're going to fall off in your hands. Everything's pretty normal, everything's very nice, and that is a massive difference. I think if you had to go on a long trip and even do a few hours at a time, it wouldn't be a hardship in this at all. So the MR2 is definitely a much more comfortable car. I mean, we know that it's more refined, the interior is more comfortable, it's a much more complete car if you're actually going to be using it. But there are some problems here. If we look at the storage space, both in the Elise and the MR2, so this is where you have your storage, and that really is tiny. As you can see, there's a couple of oil cans there, there's the spare tyre, and that is about it. So it's very difficult to use. There is something which can help this out, and that is that there are some storage bins behind the seats, and the Elise does lack that. So that helps a little bit, but if we look at the storage space on the Elise, it's actually really not bad. Now on mine, I have the bag rather than the sort of solid boot, but it's a good bit of space. You can get quite a bit of kit in there. The issue is, obviously in mine, it will cook things. With if you have the plastic hardcover one, it will be a bit better. But all the same, the advantage in terms of practicality goes down a little bit if you're looking at that side of things. There really isn't that much that you can get into an MR2. The gearbox feels really, really nice. It's got a good feel to it. It's quick enough. Good marks for the gearbox, and I think that is one area where it is better than the Elise. So one of the areas of weakness for the MR2 Spyder is reputed to be the engine. It was always criticised, or Toyota was criticised, for not putting in the 2ZZ lump, which had 180 horsepower. They put in the 1ZZ with 140 horsepower. Now, if we are comparing to the Elise, well, this is at least 200 kilos heavier. So although it's still a lightweight, compared to the Elise, it is a heavier car. They have about the same power. My VVC engine has about 145 horsepower. But this feels significantly slower. You really have to rev it, which is no bad thing, but it doesn't have the immediacy in the throttle response. It's just that it's pulling more weight and it has less torque low down. So in terms of the engine as well, definitely for me anyway, a preference with my Elise. The way it feels as well, the sound that comes out of it, I prefer the K-Series to this. So when it comes to the looks of these two cars, it's obviously a subjective thing, but in my eyes, the MR2 has a bit of a problem. That problem is, personally for me, this is one of my very favourite all-time designs. I absolutely love the way the S1 looks. I always have from when it came out. I just thought it was absolutely perfect. I have since found out some people don't like them. My friend JM, for example, he never quite liked the S1. He always preferred the S2s and so on. But for me, the design, the front end, the back end of the car, they are it's just perfect. I love it. So the MR2 is up against a little bit of a struggle in that way because it's up against one of my favourite cars. Also, really historically, this is the first time I've spent, a serious amount of time looking around one or spending time with one, but historically, from what I've seen of them, I was never really that impressed. They're not ugly, but I just found them a little bit bland. Something just doesn't quite gel, especially the back end of the car. So it's just, I don't know. For me, from some angles, it does look quite good. From others, it just doesn't quite work. So looks-wise, I will let you make up your own mind, but certainly for me, the Elise is just untouchable. I absolutely love it. Having said that, the MR2 isn't a bad looking little car, and again, we've got to bear in mind when we're talking about this and when we're doing this video, we absolutely have to bear in mind the price difference between the two. Okay, even for me, yes, it does look better, but does it look 5 or 6 times better? I mean, these are available for so much less money. So a couple of other things to mention on this car. It is really quite standard, not many of them are. This is a 5-speed, the facelift had the 6-speed, and the one thing that it does have is slightly stiffer and lower springs, which I think does help, because one of the other things that I've heard is that they are a little bit too soft to standard. But is it 90% of an Elise? I'm sorry, but it isn't. It really, really isn't. And it's a lovely little car to drive, and if it wasn't up against one of the absolute titans of car handling and fun and just amazingness, it is brilliant. It is really good. I love it, and it's usable, and they are so cheap. You can get a decent one of these for you can get a really good one of these for about £4,000. The equivalent Elise will be about £20,000. Now, if you consider that, is the Elise 5 times better than this MR2? No, it isn't. It isn't, but it depends what your priorities are. If you want ultimate driving pleasure, then this doesn't approach the Elise. It just doesn't. It's got that mid-engine lack of inertia feel, but I think the biggest thing for me, it does feel heavier, it does roll more, you can feel that mass a bit more, but the biggest thing for me is just that the way the steering sort of responds off center is a little bit too artificial. I think with time I'd probably get used to that, and you know, it wouldn't matter as much. But yeah, they're great cars, but if you haven't driven an S1, you just have to, because there's nothing, for me, there's nothing out there quite like them. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Toyota guys, please don't take umbrage. The Elise is just unbelievable, but I think these are absolute bargains for the money. If you're thinking of buying an MR2, I would say go for it. Really amazing cars. Thank you so much for watching. Please do subscribe if you haven't already. See you for the next video.